Manhattan after 11 p.m. is like an underground river beneath a frozen surface. Seemingly still, yet thousands of things are flowing, shifting, moving quietly underneath. Just like the basement system of Sterling and Hale Bank, a long-established investment bank with a skyscraper headquarters in Midtown, where chrome-plated elevators lift people up to the 50th floor to sign million-dollar deals. Yet completely forget about the B3 and B4 levels. Places no one needs to remember. No one wants to remember, and better left unvisited unless absolutely necessary. That night, a man walked in through the building's north service entrance. No sound, no warning, no appointment. He didn't need to be called. He already knew where he had to go. He wore a dark gray uniform, old-fashioned in style with faded pant cuffs. On his chest was a small, hand-sewn patch that read in white letters, Mr. J. No key card, no digital ID badge. When he walked past the security gate, the indicator light neither turned green nor red. It simply blinked yellow, then faded out. Carlos, the guard sipping his coffee, didn't notice. And even if he had, he would have just chalked it up to a glitch in the old system. Brody, the night shift supervisor, was hunched over his iPad, checking the janitorial shift schedule. When he heard the faint sound of a metal cart rolling down the hallway into the service lobby, he looked up, frowning. In front of him stood an old man, thin, wearing a glove on his right hand, pushing a cart with an oddly quiet steadiness. "You're the new guy from Neat Tech, right?" Brody asked, his voice dripping with lazy contempt. The man nodded. "Name?" "Mr. J, number real name. I need it for the personnel report." "They call me Mr. J." "This isn't a TV show, old man. We're not on a broadcast either." Brody squinted, ready to say something, then snorted. "Fine. B3 and B4 only. Don't even think about heading up to the executive levels. Don't talk to anyone. And try not to sniff the smell of the past for too long. The past smells like things that once mattered." "What?" "Nothing." The man pushed his cart forward, not giving Brody a chance to respond. The young supervisor scowled, marked a box on his shift sheet, and muttered, "Smells like the damn 90s. The service elevator groaned as it began its descent. The cabin light flickered dimly. No music, no internal ads, just an old mirror on the back wall, scratched and cloudy like a memory no one ever bothered to clean. In that mirror, the man saw himself, or some version of himself, being led into a place as old as the past he'd never forgotten. The doors opened on B3. The air was cool and damp. Concrete floors tiled in industrial brick. White-painted concrete walls now tinged with yellow. Overhead, a jungle of wiring, air ducts, and water pipes. Some areas were unlit. Some wall sections bore faded handprints no one cared to wipe clean. But he didn't grimace, didn't shake his head, didn't mutter complaints. He walked down the corridor like someone who had built it. His left hand brushed gently across the edges of the metal doors, like touching a memory. One door read Archive 4C. He stopped. His fingers found a small dent beneath the handle, a groove no one else would have noticed. He tapped on it 3 times. No one heard, but he knew the echo was real. Room 4C remained unchanged since the Cold War era, lined with filing cabinets, smelling of old paper and glue. No one came down here. No one needed to. But Mr. J walked through as if inspecting to ensure everything was still intact. He continued downward to B4. Deeper, darker, no Wi-Fi signal. Security cameras either dead or abandoned. This was where things long forgotten were stored, or buried. And then he reached a massive door, thick, solid black steel, triple locked, a mechanical dial, a keypad, a faded fingerprint scanner. No one had ordered him to be there, but he stood nonetheless. He didn't touch anything, just leaned forward, using his gloved hand to wipe away a portion of the dust from the keypad. And there it was, an old marking etched beneath the grime, 3 interlocking circles, barely visible beneath the weight of time. He placed his hand on it, not to open it, but to remember. When he left, he didn't look back. He didn't need to check whether the camera was working, because he already knew. That ceiling cam hadn't passed inspection since 2016. When Carlos walked past the B4 hallway around 2 a.m., he saw a strange, clean trail stretching from one end of the corridor to the front of the vault room door. No one was in sight, no sounds. But there was a feeling, as if someone had just walked through, leaving only silence behind. Carlos paused for a few seconds, then moved on. He didn't report anything. Like everyone else, he stayed quiet about what he didn't want to get involved with. Mr. J returned to the maintenance supply room on B3. He opened the second drawer on the right, not to grab tools, but to pull out a worn notebook, wrapped in handcrafted leather. Inside, the yellowed pages were filled with blue ink sketches, detailed floor plans of the Sterling and Hale building, blueprints of electrical conduits, emergency exits, ventilation paths, even elements no longer found in the current CAD systems, as if the original designer had been him. Page 14 showed the B4 layout, but not the current version. This was the 1981 pre-expansion draft with a margin note, Vault Room A, locked physically, digital interface added 1997. At the bottom, a small handwritten line, underlined, legacy codes remain embedded. Only one still alive remembers them all. He closed the notebook, tucked it away, wiped his hands with a clean rag, and stepped out. No one saw what he did. No one paid attention to where he went. But the next morning, a few morning shift employees noticed that the B3 hallway, long stained with a patch of mold near the drainage pipe, was suddenly spotless. And curiously, the pipe that had been rusting and leaking for years had stopped dripping. The technician called down to inspect scratched his head, puzzled. "We haven't sent anyone to fix this, but someone's definitely replaced the seal." Carlos was the first to strike up a conversation. One night later, seeing Mr. J washing his hands by the sink in the back, he handed him a cup of hot coffee. "For you. No one brews strong like I do." The man accepted it with a nod. No smile, no words. But there was something in his eyes that resembled gratitude, a feeling unspoken. Carlos sat nearby, exhaled, watched the man for a few seconds, then softly said, "Some of the guys say you're weird. Some of the guys say you're weird, that you don't talk because you're hiding something." The man stayed quiet. Carlos added slowly, "Me? I think sometimes people don't speak because they've seen too many talk without doing." The man turned toward him. For the first time in many nights, he spoke. "And you?" "I stay quiet when no one's ready to listen." The man nodded. "Good. You'll need that. Soon." Carlos frowned, but when he looked again, Mr. J had already stood up, walking toward the cold storage room. All he could see now was the back of that faded uniform, support staff, barely legible across the shoulders. The next night's shift felt heavier than usual, not because of a broken ventilation system, but because something invisible had begun to settle over the people working through the night. Those who once believed their jobs were nothing more than a repetition, filing documents, scrubbing floors, checking inventory, suddenly felt watched, not by eyes, but by a presence, as if someone knew this place far better than the people holding the keys to it. The man they all called Mr. J still said nothing. No greetings, no complaints, no requests. But his actions had begun to draw attention. The electrical box on B4, marked as faulty for a week, suddenly began working again without any repair order. A storage room's rusty lock, once labeled unusable, corroded, somehow opened. Inside, untouched financial records from 2002 that had never been digitized. The technical team was summoned, assuming a documentation error, but the cameras in that area had no footage for the past 48 hours. Just a single line in the system log. Cleaning schedule, ID janitor N7. No one knew who that ID belonged to, except Brody. He pulled up the internal staff directory, searched the ID number, and found nothing. The system showed only external vendor, no system badge, no biometric record. He scowled. There was no way someone could access the lower levels, night after night, without leaving a trace in the time log. He called HR to confirm the Neat Tech contract. The staffer on the other end said, "Your site only had one person from Neat Tech handed over on Monday night. No badge ID recorded, just noted as janitor, requested by site operations." Brody slammed the phone down and scribbled on his tablet in harsh strokes. "Check badge creation logs. Investigate janitor N7." That evening, as Sasha, the intern from legal, was leaving the copy room late, she passed by the break room on B3. Inside, she saw Mr. J sitting alone, holding a small notebook, writing with a blue fountain pen. No typing, no app, just ink on paper. She hesitated, then walked in, pretending to get some water. When she opened the fridge, her eyes flicked toward the notebook and caught a glimpse of a floor plan, marked with such intricate annotations that even the interior design team wouldn't recognize them from the current blueprints. She tried to strike up a conversation. "What are you jotting down, sir?" He didn't look up, didn't respond. Just closed the notebook with a motion so fluid, it looked like someone trained in handling classified files. Sasha gave a soft smile. "I'm Sasha, legal intern. You probably know that. I keep getting lost on the lower levels." He nodded. "The lower levels are where people stash what they don't want to remember, but can't bring themselves to throw away." She paused. "So, you used to work here?" He replied without looking at her. "Once." She nodded back and left, without asking more. But in her mind, a question had begun to form and grow. The next morning, Carlos found something unusual beneath the tape drawer in the maintenance room. A piece of paper folded in quarters, faded ink, no heading, no sender's name. He opened it. Inside was a diagram of the original control room, the building's first-generation electrical system, with cable paths long assumed to be removed. Yet this diagram clearly marked hidden conduits linking B4 to the executive control systems, with a handwritten note in purple ink. "The records are still there. They've just been renamed." Carlos didn't fully understand, but he knew someone was searching for something the system wanted buried. Brody, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly anxious. He convened a closed-door meeting with building security, demanding a full audit of camera access logs for the past 10 days. The results shocked him. All camera systems on B3 and B4 recorded activity each night, but the images were distorted, timestamps didn't match any badge-activated entry, and every clip was marked Source, Unknown Badge ID, classified as external, not reviewable. "Why the hell can't we review them?" Brody snapped. An IT staffer replied awkwardly, "Because the old security firmware still retains some of the original encryption layers. Certain access types can temporarily override camera feeds, but only the founder had those codes." Brody clenched his fists. Founder? That word felt like a ghost. Sterling had retired. Grant was dead. Chen had moved to another firm back in 2011. "What about the fourth name?" he asked. The room fell silent. "I heard there was another one, someone removed from the records," a hesitant voice whispered. Brody slammed the table. "I want that name, all founding files, originals included." Meanwhile, Sasha was quietly digging for information about the man she now suspected to be far more than a janitor. She casually asked Carlos, "That janitor, does he have a real name?" Carlos chuckled. "Everyone just calls him the mute janitor. I guess because he never says anything. But I once saw him talking to the hallway." "What do you mean?" she asked. "I was on rounds one night, saw him stop in front of an old circuit box, place his hand on it, and whisper, 'There's still a voice behind the wall.' I don't know what it meant, but when I checked, there really was a small electrical leak." Sasha said slowly, "So he's not mute, is he?" "Not at all. I think he stays silent because they've forgotten who he is." Sasha started searching the old archive room. She sifted through hand-kept records from 2000 to 2005 and stumbled upon a PowerPoint backup in a dusty folder labeled Strategic Draft 2002. She opened it. First slide, the old Sterling and Hale logo. Second slide, the title, Reimagining Structure, Internal Reforms for Sustainability by M.H. Sasha froze. "M.H.?" she whispered. She printed the file and brought it to Carlos. Carlos squinted at the paper. "If I'm guessing right, M.H. might be..." He stopped, stared at the page. Then again, "Wait, no way. If I'm right, that man's not a janitor. He's the one who wrote the system we're working under." Sasha lowered her voice. "And if his name was once Michael Hale..." Carlos looked at her, suddenly serious. "Then it means they erased all traces of one of the founders." Sasha folded the printout, slid it into a hardcover folder, and quickly walked out of the archive, as if afraid the contents might catch fire in her hands if she stayed a second longer. Her thoughts raced. Why erase a founder's name? Why does no one at Sterling and Hale even mention it? And why would a man, one who mops hallways at midnight, who never demands a thing, know every wire in the wall like the back of his hand? When she returned to the maintenance zone on B3, Mr. J was sitting beside the water tank, wiping an old wrench with a gray cloth. Not because it was dirty, but because he had likely used it for something important. Sasha stepped closer, silently. He looked up at her, his eyes unsurprised, as if he already knew she'd come. She held out the folder. "You wrote this presentation, didn't you?" He didn't answer, didn't nod, didn't shake his head, just stared, with a look so deep it made lies impossible. She lowered her voice. "Michael Hale." No one had spoken that name aloud in 20 years, but the moment it left her lips, the room seemed to stop breathing. He kept looking at her, then set the wrench on the table, stood up, stepped forward, and said softly, "You weren't supposed to know that, but now you can't unknow it." On the wall, the old analog clock read 3:19 a.m. He pulled out a small drawer, took out a rolled-up map tied with cloth. He spread it open. It was the full underground blueprint of the building, color-coded routes, pathway legends, and one red-circled zone. Area not shown in 2012 blueprint. She looked, then whispered, "Legacy Vault." He nodded. "The key is still in the building, but it's not made of metal. It's memory." Sasha gave a faint smile. "But memory can't unlock a door," he replied, eyes steady. "Not with hands, but with truth." She didn't ask more. Not sure she should, but she knew one thing. By tomorrow morning, she would return there. And he, the man no one ever truly saw, would already be one step ahead. In the security office, Carlos was reviewing footage when he noticed a video clip that froze mid-play. At second 34, the frame halted. In that still image, Mr. J stood in front of the vault door on B4, his hand resting on the 3 interlocking circles. Behind him, a strange glow, not from any light, but a metallic shimmer reflecting off his cheek. Carlos rewound it 3 times. Each time it froze at the same moment. That hand on the wall, not rushed, not hesitant, like someone who had once built it. Carlos picked up his phone and sent Sasha a simple message. "I believe you." The B4 level was always uniquely cold, not because of overactive ventilation, but because it no longer seemed to belong to the present. The air down there wasn't just air, it was memory seeping through the cracks in old plaster walls, where the fluorescent lights didn't warm the space, only made the untouched corners more visible. One late afternoon, Sasha was assigned to verify the organizational layout for internal branch listings, a task from the communications department. A dull job, really, little more than matching documents to wall charts. But it required her to go all the way down to B4 to cross-check the legacy honor boards, the bronze plaques engraved with the names of founding personnel once celebrated during the golden age of Sterling and Hale. Sasha went with a logistics staffer, holding a printed list of names, checking them off as they walked. Sterling, check. Grant, check. Chen, check. Brody wants to confirm the order so they can print a full-size version for the front lobby. When they reached the south wall of B4, Sasha stopped cold. The nameplates were precisely bolted to the wall in neat rows. Each plaque bore a name, a title, a founding year, and a signature quote reflecting leadership vision. Sterling's read, "Trust begins with numbers." Grant's, "People are data too." Chen's, "Build it, break it, rebuild it better." But one spot was empty, not uninstalled empty. There was a clear rectangular stain on the darker wall surface, where a plaque had once been mounted but was now removed. Sasha leaned in close. The dust outline was still visible. 4 bolt holes remained, with traces of aged green copper corrosion, indicating the missing plaque had been there longer than any of the others. But now it was gone. "Why is one person missing?" she murmured. The logistics guy shrugged. "I just follow the new list. If they cut someone, must mean it's no longer relevant." Sasha stood silent for a few seconds. She looked around. No one else nearby. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of the wall, captured every detail, then typed a note into her phone. "Plaque removed, outline clear, Suspected record alteration. That afternoon, she visited the communications office and asked Brody offhandedly, "I noticed an old founder list had a blank spot. Do you know who used to be there?" Brody was holding a coffee mug, didn't even look up. "Some relic. Don't worry about it. We don't talk about that era." The chill that ran down her spine wasn't from what he said, but how he said it. This wasn't avoidance. It was deliberate erasure. She realized at once. That name hadn't simply been forgotten. It had been deleted, and someone wanted it to stay that way. Meanwhile, Mr. J still passed that wall every night. No one paid attention. No one imagined he cared. But the truth was, every night he paused in front of that blank space for exactly 20 seconds. No more, no less. Just long enough to stand, to look, to remember. Some nights he wiped away the dust around the frame. Some nights he stood motionless, hands folded at his waist, as if bowing before an unmarked grave. Once Carlos saw him there. Carlos didn't speak, but later told Sasha. He stood there like it was a tombstone. Sasha whispered, "Not a grave, a piece of evidence." On the third night after Sasha discovered the missing plaque, she returned alone to B4, using the excuse of verifying historical cross-references with the internal library. In her hand was a printed set of personnel chart revisions over the years, copied from an old backup drive she had quietly accessed from the secondary server. Among them, the 2003 version stood out. At the top were 4 names: Sterling, Grant, Chen, and Hale. Yes, Hale. M.H., the initials from the PowerPoint presentation she had uncovered earlier. But something was strange in the 2004 version. Only 3 names remained. Hale was gone. No reason given. No note. No retired, transferred, or deceased like in other cases. Just removed. She photographed the documents and stored them in an encrypted folder. Then she quietly walked down the hall to the wall, to that icy patch with the ghost of a frame now clearer than ever. She stood in front of it and for the first time wondered how many others had stood here before her, looked at that empty space and stayed silent. And why did Mr. J pass by every night as if guarding it? A soft rolling sound echoed in the distance. She didn't need to turn around to know it was him, not from the wheels but from the steady cadence, like an old clock. Neither rushed nor slow. He stopped behind her, just close enough that she knew he saw what she was seeing. She didn't turn around, just asked, "That plaque used to be yours, didn't it?" He said nothing. She continued, "They couldn't erase what you built, so they chose to erase your name." This time he replied softly, "What do you see?" She turned and pointed at the rectangular dust outline. "I see the trace of cowardice, covered in the quiet color of fresh paint." He nodded. "Good. Now you understand why not everyone is allowed to remember." She pulled from her coat pocket a small piece of bronze, a broken hinge she had picked up the day before, just beneath the wall. "This fell from the old plaque, didn't it?" He took it, examined it, and slipped it into his pocket. "A piece of memory has fallen, but at least it's still in the hands of someone who sees it." He turned to go. Sasha remained where she was, unsure if she'd just been warned or trusted, maybe both. Up on the 7th floor, Brody was furiously typing, eyes locked on his screen. He had gained access to the early-phase corporate media archive, the gallery of old events, dedications, contract signings. He used facial recognition software to scan the entire image database with the keyword Michael Hale. The search returned 31 results, all labeled "Access Denied, Archived by Legal." He growled. He reopened the internal audit report sent 3 years earlier. In the brand assets section, one footnote stood out: pending confirmation of rights related to Hale in public release materials. Reference 2004 precedent. No one had ever clarified that note, and now Brody knew. This was the trail no one wanted followed. He grabbed his phone, called Chief Legal Officer Eleanor Finch. She answered after 3 rings, her voice unnervingly alert for someone supposedly home at 9 p.m. "Brody, I need to talk. It's about someone named Michael Hale." A pause followed, not long, but not short enough to be accidental. Then Eleanor spoke slowly. I thought we agreed to remove that name from all brand-facing structures in 2010. He's here. What? In the building. As a janitor. But he knows everything. Everything. Eleanor stayed silent for 2 seconds. Then, no one comes back without leaving a trace. If he's there, then either we made a mistake or someone's playing a game that goes beyond legal. I have photos, I have proof. Stay quiet. Tell no one. I'll be there Monday. In person. Back on B4, Sasha sat alone in the old maintenance break room, no longer in use but somehow quieter than anywhere else. She laid out her printouts, the old blueprints, the photo of the missing plaque wall, the 1979 founder list, the redacted 2004 document. Then she placed the photo Carlos had sent the night before on top, a grainy black and white image of 4 men and 1 woman standing in front of Sterling and Hale's doors on opening day. Each wore a name tag. The 4th man, smaller, thinner, with round glasses and a deeper gaze, had a tag that read, Michael Hale, EVP Operations. Sasha circled his face, wrote, Same man as janitor? Beneath it she added, If yes, this isn't a story about someone forgotten. It's about a system designed to erase memory. As she left the room, the blueprint shifted from the draft. A breeze had flipped it to the back page, the page she hadn't yet seen. At the bottom was a handwritten line in blue ink, unlike the technical symbols elsewhere. Memory doesn't need recognition to exist. It only needs someone who won't let it go. That night after everyone had left, Mr. J returned to the B4 hallway. He carried a small brown fabric bag. Inside was the old bronze nameplate, polished anew, its inscription deeply restored. Michael Hale, co-founder, 1979. He stood in front of the blank wall, looked, said nothing, then raised the plaque and placed it gently where it had once hung. No measuring, no adjusting. It fit perfectly, as if it had never been taken down, as if it had never been forgotten. But he didn't reattach it. He held the plaque for a few seconds, then carefully wrapped it again in cloth, put it back in the bag, turned and walked away. As he passed the door to the maintenance room, Sasha stood at the far end of the hallway. She saw him, said nothing, just nodded. He nodded back. No words needed. The next morning, someone noticed faint red writing on the wall where the blank space was, like chalk from an old schoolroom. Truth doesn't die, it just gets relocated. Brody saw it, shivered, ordered it erased immediately. But the cleaner assigned that morning, a new hire, couldn't scrub it off even after using 3 different solvents. There was only one option left, paint over it. They had once erased a name with paint. Now they would paint again, to cover the truth. And this time, the cameras recorded everything. But the question remained, who would dare watch? B4 had no windows. It didn't know if it was raining or sunny outside. It didn't distinguish night from day beyond the steel walls. But in that sealed space one night, something long silent let out a sound so faint it seemed accidental. A single beep from the keypad outside the room, known among staff as the Legacy Vault. No one had touched that system in nearly 10 years. No access had been granted since 2012. It was deemed defunct, both the software and its original purpose. But that night, at 2:37 a.m., the internal security system registered a manual code entry attempt on the B4 control panel. No keycard, no camera activation. Just a string of numbers, 2-9-7-4-1-0-8-6-3. A longer than standard code, belonging to no current format, but once entered, the red light turned amber, then green. The mechanical lock clicked. The metal handle rotated 1.5 times, and the door, long presumed abandoned, opened a narrow crack. The only person standing there was Mr. J. No one saw him go in. No one saw him come out. And when the guards arrived, responding to a vague system flag, they found the door closed as before. No sign of tampering, no break-in, no one inside, just a lingering scent of old paint and aged leather, like a memory suspended in air. The next morning, Brody received a system fault report from security. The alert read, manual keypad activated, unrecognized code, Access time 2:37. Door open for 4 minutes, 12 seconds. His face went pale. He ordered hallway footage pulled. Blank. No signal. He checked badge access logs. No one entered during that window. No one? Impossible. Unless someone didn't need a badge, didn't need fingerprints, didn't need an identity scan, because the code was theirs to begin with. Brody cursed, then slammed a new query into the database. Print all founder records from 1979 to 2005. B3 level, 4 a.m. Mr. J stood alone in the archive room. In his hand was an old printout, aged ivory paper, ink slightly smudged, but the numbers still sharp. At the top it read, Vault Access Code, 1997 Legacy Structure, MH only. He folded the paper and placed it inside his inner pocket. On the table, his notebook lay open. The freshly written page read, Code verified, still active, no purge. Meaning, system still believes I exist. He didn't smile, but his hand clenched the edge of the notebook tightly, as if something that had haunted him for 2 decades had just been proven true. Carlos approached, handing him a cup of coffee like always. This time he accepted it, nodded, and softly said, If I disappear, look for the place with the 3 circles. Carlos stared, confused. 3 what? 3 remembered, 1 erased, but the symbol remains. He didn't wait for a reply, just bowed his head and walked down the corridor, his steps slow but deliberate, less like a janitor, more like someone retracing the milestones of a past only he could validate. On the 6th floor, Eleanor Finch had arrived earlier than usual. She called for a closed-door meeting with Brody and the head of internal legal. On the table lay a color printout of an old photo, Michael Hale, standing beside Sterling on the building's inauguration day. Beside it sat the previous night's security report. She read it line by line silently, then looked up. Who signed the order to remove his name from the system? No one answered, she nodded. No one signed it, because it was all agreed upon verbally. Brody blurted out, But he vanished 20 years ago. Wrong, she said. We're the ones who vanished. He merely stepped back, waiting for the system to reveal its true nature. In the B4 break room, Sasha received a small brown envelope placed inside her desk drawer. No sender. Inside was an old magnetic access card, faded yellow, silver trim, and a hand-etched message on the back. Access all, founder level, valid until revoked. The front bore the name, Michael Hale. Her hands trembled. She knew. No one in the company still held one of these. It was from the foundational era. She held it and walked toward the vault door. It remained closed. But when she tapped the card on the scanner, nothing lit up. No signal. But she heard the soft grind of metal mechanisms shifting from inside. She didn't go in. She simply stood there, breathing lightly, understanding. Some doors don't need to open to reveal who truly owns them. In the darkness of the bank's lower floors, where numbers were once measured by trust, not branding, a long-buried code had reawakened. A name once deleted had risen, not with a shout, but with the smallest sound in a modern system, the slow turn of a mechanical lock on the right code. In the B4 storage zone, there was a room with no name, no code, and no presence on any operational blueprint after 2006. The door was made of steel, had no electronic lock, only a rusted handle and an old mechanical keyhole dulled by time. There was no sign on the door, no direction markers. The only person who still remembered this room existed was the one who had laid its first concrete block, Michael Hale. That night, after his rounds were done, after the night staff had returned to the break room, after the security system had entered its natural slowdown cycle, Mr. J returned to that room, a small flashlight clipped to his collar. The door opened after 2 firm manual turns. Inside was a world sealed in dust, long iron filing cabinets, stacks of old documents, cardboard boxes darkened by moisture, and the unmistakable scent of paper aged by decades of silence. He walked straight to the 3rd cabinet from the left, 2nd drawer from the bottom. No hesitation, no fumbling. He pulled out a red folder, the special kind once used in the semi-digitized era of internal operations. No QR code, no barcode, No labeled name, no signature, no archive number, just a red folder, heavier than the others, bound by two brass fasteners. He opened it. Inside were printed financial reports from 1999 to 2003. These documents weren't stored in any current system. No one in the present executive tier even knew of their existence. But Michael Hale did, because he had written them, reviewed them, and supervised every cross-check they contained. Each page was a fragment of proof of a financial entity that once formed the backbone of the bank, Horizon Trust. Horizon Trust was a subsidiary, on paper legally unrelated to Sterling and Hale, but in practice it was a shell used to quietly allocate profit among internal branches ahead of the company's first IPO. In public filings, Horizon Trust was never mentioned. In official records, it didn't exist. But in this red folder, it existed in full detail. Supervisory names, interbranch transfers, property investment accounts, and more importantly, a sequence of internal share transfers from MH to anonymous entities before 2003. Michael Hale flipped to the last page, a faded fax printout, barely legible now, with only part of a clause still visible. Transfer terms shall only take effect upon signature by transferring party. But that page had no signature. No one had signed. No one had approved. The document had been suspended in limbo like an incision never sutured. And like him, it had been removed from all official systems. But it still existed. And now, it had returned. He photocopied the entire folder using an old machine in the corner, one he had repaired 2 days earlier. The toner wasn't fully dry as he stacked the papers, placed them carefully in an unmarked brown envelope. Then he quietly entered the CEO's office on the 40th floor, now occupied by Eleanor Finch, and slipped the envelope into her desk drawer, without any cover note, except a small sheet of paper with a handwritten line in purple ink. Your foundation is built on a lie. No signature, no threats, no accusations, just one sentence, like the strike of a judge's gavel before a verdict is read. The next morning, Eleanor found the envelope in her desk. She opened it, read every page, from beginning to end, without skipping a line. Her expression didn't change, but her left hand slowly set down her teacup, her eyes fixed on the final line. She understood. Someone knew. Someone had preserved the real copy, and someone had just taken one step too close to the place where every truth had been buried beneath layers of organized silence. That afternoon, Brody was summoned to her office. Eleanor didn't ask many questions. She simply handed him the folder. Do you recognize this? Brody flipped it open, glanced through and smirked coldly. I thought it got destroyed. Eleanor replied, so did I. But apparently, someone held on to it, and now it's back, right on cue. Brody leaned forward. Any idea who? Eleanor laid the folder back on the table, neatly aligned. Doesn't matter who. What matters is, why now? That night, Mr. J didn't appear on any cameras, but the next morning, a janitor found a single sheet of paper left on the B4 conference table. No signature, no sender. Only one bold-printed sentence. Justice doesn't come from external corridors. It comes from the very wall where you erase someone's name. Everyone understood. This wasn't the end. This was the opening statement for a hearing none of them had prepared for, because they believed that anything without a signature would be forgotten. But they'd overlooked one truth. Memory doesn't need a signature to exist. Rumors don't need a mouth to spread. At Sterling and Hale, where every wall was thicker than a confidentiality clause, where every hallway had ears and every door opened only for the right title, the things that weren't written down were the ones whispered most. And this week, the one thing not listed on any meeting schedule but on everyone's lips was the unsigned folder. No one said it aloud. No one pointed fingers. But everyone knew something had leaked. A fragment of the past had returned, and it was being passed hand to hand through half questions in elevators, glances exchanged near B4, murmurs between sips of coffee, and lines like, heard someone left something in the CEO's office. Heard it was an old file. No one knows who sent it. They say Brody's about to get reverse audited. They say it's from someone who once helped found the place. Eleanor didn't confirm, didn't deny. She let the rumors spread like dry grass in the wind. No control, no resistance. She knew that in moments like these, silence was more powerful than any press release. But internally, she was preparing for an earthquake. Brody was different. He couldn't stand not controlling the narrative. For the past 3 years, he'd done everything to shape himself as a young, tech-savvy leader with mastery over risk. But now what he couldn't see was beginning to redefine the very seat he sat on. And he knew the only thing that could destroy a power already perched high was a secret long buried. He called for a closed meeting with IT and security, demanded access logs not just for the past 24 hours, but for the last 4 weeks. He wanted to know who entered the CEO's office, who used the B4 photocopier, who logged into the old archive scanning system. The results infuriated him. Nothing. All access appeared legitimate. No strange badge IDs, no external system logins. Nothing unusual, except one thing. The hallway camera feed for B4 the previous night was corrupted. Not a software glitch. It had been overwritten with old footage from 3 months prior. "Who has clearance to do that?" he barked. The IT staffer stammered. "No one, unless they had founder-level privileges." He snapped, "Don't be ridiculous. The founders haven't been around for 2 decades. But then he froze, because in his mind flashed the image of a man, old, silent, walking steadily down the hallway, wiping away dust like he was erasing the lies built later. And Brody muttered to himself, "Mr. J." At that same moment, Mr. J was standing in the old B3 break room, his hand resting on a worn technical file. On the table was a vintage internal radio he had repaired a month earlier, now emitting faint static. But he wasn't listening to the radio. He was listening to voices. Inside the radio, he had installed a tiny recording device, handed to him by Carlos last week, not to spy on others, but to record himself. Carlos stepped in. "Need anything else?" "No." "Things are getting tense. Brody's digging through every system." "That's a good sign." "You sure?" "You know, Carlos, a system is only threatened when the truth starts to wake up, and truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be heard." Carlos was quiet for a moment, then placed a small rectangular device on the table. Black plastic casing, a modern digital recorder. "You don't need that old radio anymore. This one's digital." Mr. J smiled. "I don't need something digital. I need something that works when the power goes out." Carlos gave a wry chuckle. "The world's already gone digital." He nodded. "And that's exactly why you must learn to remember by hand." Sasha entered the room. She held a printed comparison sheet between 2 security scan systems, the 1997 model and the current one. She pointed to the diagram. "The code you use to open the vault doesn't exist in the current system, but it does exist in the base structure of the first-generation software." She looked at him. Only one person could have known that code, and the system only accepts it when the entry matches a once-authorized identity. He didn't respond, just looked at her, eyes calm like a still lake. She continued, "They're trying to prove you're a fake, but the code proves you're real." He nodded. "Good. It's time the system proves itself wrong." That night, as Brody walked past B4, he saw a piece of paper pinned to the old internal bulletin board, unused for years. On it was written, "The one who was never heard will become the one everyone must listen to." No signature, but he knew. Someone was speaking, and everyone had started listening. No one could remember who found the file first. Some said it came from the old archive system the legal department had just ordered a sweep on. Others claimed it was an intern who accidentally accessed the wrong hard drive meant for formatting. But the truth was, the PowerPoint file had never been meant to be found, at least not after 2004. It wasn't in the Founders folder, nor was it filed under Board Presentations. The file name was as meaningless as it was familiar. Presentation VRI 3 Final PPT. The kind of label people use after saving something important 10 times over. And inside it was the name the system had spent 20 years trying to forget. Sasha was the first to open it. She hadn't been searching for it. It appeared when she filtered results using the keywords 1999 to 2003 Strategic Review. When she clicked, it took nearly 10 seconds to load, the outdated formatting clashing with modern software. But when the first slide appeared, she knew instantly she wasn't wrong. The title in bold size 72, Sterling and Hale, Foundational Vision. Slide 2, presented by MH, EVP, Operations, March 2002. She blinked. Slide 3 was a growth chart, internal performance metrics, but most crucially, the small line at the bottom. All projections based on internal model, Horizon Trust/Equity Flow Plan, internal only. No slide marked public, no approved stamp, no updated logos. Every design element, every font, every diagram belonged to an earlier time, one where ideals built companies, not branding language. She scrolled through the slides. A proposal for a comprehensive HR reform in 2003, a redesigned internal reward system, a leadership development roadmap for executive succession. Every page marked with MH. The final slide had a single note. This vision isn't meant for PowerPoint. It needs people who don't need slides to know what's right. Sasha sat in silence. Part of her wanted to close the file instantly, but another part understood. This wasn't just a file. It was the missing piece of the map she and Carlos had been following for days. She printed every slide, then brought it to the security office. Carlos was on shift. She laid the printouts on the desk, flipping to the title slide. Carlos stared at it, silent for 30 seconds, then looked up and said quietly, "If this is real, then that would mean he's the founder they erased." Sasha nodded, her voice almost breaking. They didn't just erase him. They copied his ideas, they kept the structure, but they threw away the name. Carlos pushed the papers back toward her. "So now what?" She replied without hesitation. "Now we bring the name back." The next morning, Brody found a copy of the printout on his desk. No sender, no message, just one line underlined. Presented by MH. He tossed it into the trash. But as he walked out of the meeting room, his eyes couldn't stop returning to those initials. He knew this was spiraling beyond his control. He no longer controlled the narrative. He no longer controlled the system. And worse, the younger ones, the interns, the guards, the night shift workers, they were beginning to pass the truth among themselves. Not through email, but through looks, through unsigned printouts, through the quiet nods exchanged in the hallways of B4. That night, Carlos printed the entire PowerPoint and posted one copy on the B4 bulletin board. By morning, someone had taken it down. But less than 2 hours later, a new version appeared, this time a scanned copy, taped to the break room door. It was removed again, and another replaced it, this time laminated and pinned with clear plastic. At this point, Brody issued an order to take it down for good, but the staff assigned to the task replied with only one sentence. "I couldn't find who put it up." Brody growled, "You don't need to know who. You just need to know whose order it was." But the young employee said nothing. He simply looked down at the floor, then turned and walked away. Later that same day, Eleanor received an anonymous internal message. "It's time to return the missing name to the founder's wall." No sender, no signature, but she knew exactly who wrote it, and she knew the system was beginning to correct itself. Friday night, Manhattan was damp, the wind from the Hudson sweeping between the buildings like the sigh of something about to happen, something no one dared name yet. Deep inside Sterling and Hale, B4 looked as it always did, quiet, empty, dimly lit, its concrete corridors seemingly untouched by human feet. But tonight was different. Tonight the air carried the scent of a moment long awaited. Mr. J appeared as always, silent, unhurried, pushing his janitor's cart down the hallway with the same humble posture no one paid attention to. But this time, there was no mop, no bucket. On his cart was an old canvas bag, a round-head flashlight, a leather-bound notebook, and a heavy brass plaque carefully wrapped in soft cloth, so carefully that no one could guess what it was without unwrapping it. He walked to the old vault door at the end of the east corridor, the one new employees were told not to approach, the one that triggered a system error every week but no one addressed because there's nothing inside. The door was unchanged, still protected by 3 layers of security, mechanical, keypad, and fingerprint. This time he didn't use the code. He didn't need to. He was the only one who still remembered how to open it from before the digital system was installed. He pulled from his pocket a key, not an electronic one, but a solid brass key, tarnished by years. He slid it into a narrow slot below the mechanical handle. A soft click echoed, light as a glass tapping glass. He turned the dial in sequence. 3-1-9-7-2-4. Something inside shifted gently. He didn't stop. His right hand rested on the symbol of three interlocking rings, the original emblem of Sterling and Hale from its founding, and pressed a small hidden button beneath the edge of the design. A mechanism behind the metal responded. The entire door vibrated slightly, then slowly began to open, like the exhale of a cave sealed for years. Dim light fell on what lay inside, and the first thing revealed was not money nor rare assets. It was a single oak box with a hand-carved inscription, Meeting Minutes, Founders Archive, 1979 to 2004. He opened the lid. Inside were founding meeting transcripts, original equity distribution charts, early-stage proposals, and most importantly, a 32-page hardcover document titled Initial Ownership Agreement, Sterling and Hale, executed by S. Sterling and M. Hale. The final page held two signatures, clear and indisputable, Sterling and Michael Hale. He flipped to the ownership section. Sterling, 30%, Grant, 25%, Chen, 20%, Hale, 25%. No one had mentioned this for 20 years. In public, Sterling had been recognized as the sole founder. On the company's homepage, there was no co-founders section. At the 40th anniversary celebration, Michael Hale's name wasn't mentioned once. But here, in the very vault he had installed by hand, the truth still lay, intact. He pulled a small envelope from beside the documents. Inside was a hand-engraved brass founder ID badge. It read, Michael Hale, co-founder, 1979. No one had ever seen this badge except him and Sterling. Now it rested in his palm, a shard of memory made metal, cold, real, impossible to erase. He closed the box, gently placed everything into the canvas bag. Out in the hallway, the nameplate frame was still empty, just a rectangle of dust where no one ever wiped clean. He took out the brass plaque he had prepared. His hands trembled slightly, not out of fear, but from the weight of the symbol he was about to restore to its rightful place. He fitted the plaque into the frame, used the original screws he had placed there 20 years ago. No re-drilling required. Everything aligned perfectly, as if time had never moved. The plaque read, Michael Hale, co-founder, 1979. At the bottom, a single engraved quote in black ink. Not everyone who stays silent lacks a voice. As he walked away, the B4 security cameras came back online. The red light blinked. Every frame recorded clearly. An elderly man in an old maintenance uniform walking through the corridor, passing the newly affixed nameplate, saying nothing, not looking back, but leaving behind a name once erased, now resting in a place where it could no longer be ignored. Saturday morning, Carlos was the first to find it. He stopped, hot coffee in hand, and stood there silently, staring at the nameplate for almost a full minute. No words, no sharp breaths. He texted Sasha a single word. It happened. When Sasha arrived, she didn't ask questions. She simply stood beside him. Neither needed to say who had done it. They knew, and they understood. This was the point of no return. And somewhere in an executive office upstairs, Eleanor Finch received a message with a photo of the new nameplate. She looked at it, said nothing. Then she set her phone down, turned her chair toward the window and whispered to herself, finally, the truth is back where it belongs. Monday, 7:46 a.m. The Sterling and Hale system stirred to life with the sound of coffee brewing, elevators stopping at the executive floor, high heels clicking on white marble. Like any other start of the week, suits moved fast. Bluetooth headsets in place, 3 Excel sheets open at once, talking about dividends, board reports, Asian markets, inflation. But today, a stream of people moved slower than usual. Not because they were tired, but because they had seen something that had never been there before. Or more precisely, something that once was, but no one had expected to ever return. On B4, in the long corridor connecting the archive rooms, where most executives had never set foot, a cluster had gathered. Technicians, security guards, a few interns, even some staff from the finance team. They stood around a newly mounted nameplate. The brass gleamed. The engraving was sharp, elegant, handwritten style. Michael Hale, co-founder, 1979. No one spoke. Each person came to look, stood in silence for a few seconds, then walked away. But every step they took away from that name carried with it a piece of shock, of awakening, and of a question none dared ask aloud. Why was his name never mentioned before? Brody was the first from senior leadership to be alerted. He was en route to a meeting when a staffer messaged, "Someone reinstalled a nameplate on B4. You should go down." He snapped, "I don't care who's messing with plaques." But as he stepped into the elevator, a mid-level manager quietly said, "You really should see it. The whole building's talking about it." Brody went down to B4, didn't say a word, walked the corridor. When he saw the nameplate, his face went rigid. He sped up, pulled out his phone, took a photo, and immediately called facilities. "Who installed this? Who approved it?" The voice on the other end stammered, "There was no request submitted, no new plaque ordered, no report logged." He gritted his teeth. "Take it down, now." But before he could turn back, Eleanor Finch was already standing there. No one heard her arrive. No one had told her to come. But she stood exactly 1 meter from the plaque, eyes unblinking, holding a leather-bound folder in one hand. She spoke softly, but just loud enough for everyone in the corridor to hear. "Who authorized this plaque?" No one answered. A technician murmured, It was just there this morning. No one saw it being mounted." Eleanor nodded. She turned to Brody. "You intend to remove it?" "It's not on the official registry. It wasn't approved. It hasn't been legally verified." "And if I say I approve it?" Brody fell silent. Eleanor opened the folder. Inside was the original Sterling and Hale founding agreement. Ivory paper, real ink, flourishing signatures in cobalt blue, embossed seal and notarization from 1979. The wording was clear in Section 2. Co-founders Samuel Sterling and Michael Hale. She handed it to Brody. "You want to deny it?" If you deny it, I'll send this to the full board. If you don't, the name stays." The entire hallway fell still, but not with the usual Monday quiet. Not the fatigue from the weekend, not the vacancy of an empty lobby. It was the kind of silence that falls when everyone suddenly realizes that what they've been taught as history might simply be the edited version. Sasha stood at the far end. She didn't push forward. She didn't need to. Carlos stood beside her. He whispered, "See?" No one had to shout. No one had to rage. But everyone understands exactly what's happening. Sasha replied softly, "They thought he was a janitor. But really, he's the memory that survived forgetting." That afternoon, Eleanor held an unscheduled meeting with senior management. No live stream, no media, no minutes. She stood in the rectangular conference room where Sterling's solo portrait used to hang at the center. She had it replaced with a group photo from the 1979 Founders Summit. In it, Michael Hale stood at the far left, holding the blueprint of the bank. She pointed to the image. "We once erased someone's name from this wall, but he didn't erase us from his memory. And today, justice, not by law but by truth, has been restored." The room remained still. Michael Hale wasn't present, but everyone could feel him. In the hallway, in the documents, in every vault code, in the eyes of those who once believed he was just an old man with a mop. Wednesday. Manhattan was gloomier than usual, as if the sky itself were bracing for something long hidden to finally surface. On the 40th floor of Sterling and Hale, Eleanor Finch sat motionless behind the large boardroom table, her hand resting on an internal memo not yet sent. The header read, "Clarification of Founding History, Internal Statement." Beneath it were two names, Samuel Sterling and Michael Hale. No additions, no omissions, no footnotes, no asterisks. Just one simple line restoring the truth. She hadn't signed it yet, not out of hesitation, but because something was still missing. A presence, a confirmation, not in writing, but in person. At that moment on B4, Mr. J stood in front of the men's restroom mirror, the old one, edges tarnished like the border of a map no one traveled anymore. He looked into the mirror, adjusted the collar of his uniform. Then slowly, he removed the cloth patch stitched with Mr. J from his chest. He folded it neatly and slipped it into his pocket. Then from that same pocket, he pulled out a small box. Inside, a metal nameplate. Michael Hale, co-founder. He pinned it over the spot where the patch had been. No words, no expression. But the room shifted, as if the building itself recognized he had returned. The elevator carried him to the executive floor. No one stopped him. No security. No questions. No one asked who he was. No one doubted the man stepping out from the service elevator, wearing an old suit, walking with steady, unhurried steps, eyes forward but calm. His gait wasn't that of someone coming to demand something. It was that of someone arriving when it was finally time to speak. The main boardroom was already open. Eleanor stood when he entered. She said nothing, just nodded. The other directors looked at one another, unsure, silent. Michael walked to the center podium, stood tall. The light from the wide window behind him cast his shadow long across the floor, longer than anyone else's. But he didn't use the light to impose. He used silence. And then he spoke. Not loudly, not as a lecture, but in a steady, deliberate voice, each word carved into the room like it was etched into the conference table. I did not come here to reclaim a title. I came to remind you what it means. No one moved, he continued. You built further on this house but forgot the foundation. You updated the software but deleted the original code. You replicated what I created and stamped other names on it. And I let you. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted to see what you'd build with it. He paused. An older executive cleared his throat. Can you tell us, why now? Michael looked him straight in the eye. Because only now have you been silent long enough to actually hear. Eleanor stepped forward and handed him the unsigned memo. I want you to confirm this. Michael glanced at it, then nodded. No need to add. No need to erase. Truth doesn't need justification. Eleanor signed, right there, in front of the entire board. Immediately after the meeting, all Sterling and Hale employees received an email titled, Legacy Restoration. The message was brief. Sterling and Hale formally reaffirms the names of its two founders, Samuel Sterling and Michael Hale. We respect our past, and starting today, we choose to remember it fully. No one shouted, no one cried, but on B4 a quiet line formed, people coming to see the reinstalled nameplate. This time no one removed it, no one ordered it down, and no one needed an explanation. Michael wasn't seen again after that, but he didn't disappear. He simply left his name, at the correct place, at the proper height, at the precise distance, on a brass plaque no longer covered in dust. 1 week after the fateful meeting, Sterling and Hale was no longer the Sterling and Hale it had been. Not because the company name changed, not because of a new tech system, and certainly not because of a flashy PR campaign. Everything looked the same. The logo unchanged, the floor directories still in their familiar design, calendars still packed from Monday through Friday. But what truly changed was the way people walked through the halls, the way they looked at a nameplate that once seemed meaningless, and the way they began quietly, sincerely asking a question no one had dared say aloud for years. What did we leave behind when we rushed so far ahead? Eleanor Finch was the first to initiate a real change. She didn't convene the board. She didn't issue a press release. She simply began quietly renovating the B4 floor, not to turn it into a museum, but to restore its original purpose, a foundational space. She renamed the area from Technical Archives to Legacy Floor. The new sign wasn't glossy, wasn't lit by LEDs, but hand-carved from wood, hung by matte iron chains, inscribed with one sentence, where we listen to what was once overlooked. No one objected. No one scoffed. Because the people who had quietly worked down there, technicians, guards, logistics staff, were no longer invisible. Carlos, the guard once dismissed as too dreamy, was the first to be appointed as B4's new lead. But his title wasn't supervisor or manager. It was custodian of legacy. When he received the appointment letter from Eleanor, he didn't give a speech. He asked one question. Do I have permission to change the weekly cleaning schedule? When she nodded, he made it official. The first cleaning task every Monday morning would be to polish Michael Hale's nameplate, like a ritual to begin the week, and he didn't let anyone else do it. He did it himself, with a soft cloth, warm water, and a reverence that never faded. Sasha received an email from the office of the president. Not praise, not accolades, but a full internal scholarship program called the Hale Initiative, created for employees who asked the right questions at the wrong time. She didn't reply, but the next morning she left a handwritten note on Eleanor's desk. The scholarship shouldn't be just for me. Share it with those who saw him as real, even when they didn't know who he was. Brody was different. He wasn't fired. He wasn't publicly shamed. But the system responded. In the internal HR memo, he was reassigned to the Northern Branch. Same title, but with restricted authority. He didn't react. He didn't file a complaint. He didn't send a response. He just packed up his things. And before he left the building, he stopped by B4. Stood in front of Michael Hale's nameplate for exactly 30 seconds. Then turned and walked away. Said nothing. But those who witnessed it understood. He had heard something he once believed didn't exist. The sound of a name returning to its rightful place. The internal system had another small but profound update. A new section was added to the employee training program called Founders Ethics Program. It had no standard syllabus, no exams, just a series of sessions for reflection, sharing, and remembering about the company's early values, about how it had once been built not just on numbers, but on trust. And the first speaker in the program wasn't the CEO, wasn't a consultant. It was Carlos. He stood in front of the group in his usual security uniform and opened with one simple sentence. I didn't know who Michael Hale really was, but I know he never forgot us. So now it's our turn, not to forget him. No applause, but every head nodded. On B4, a new frame was hung next to Michael Hale's nameplate. There was no photo inside. Just a single handwritten note inked in cursive. Not everyone who is silenced has nothing to say. Not everyone who works in the shadows lacks the light to lead. Below it, a faint signature, MH. There was no farewell, no press release, no banners or CEO speeches. On a quiet Friday morning at the tail end of autumn, as golden leaves began to gather along the rear walkway of the Sterling and Hale building, an administrative clerk on the third floor received a small parcel. No sender listed, no recipient name. Just a single line. Room B4, legacy custodian only. It was sealed with red wax, the kind used in another century. No tape, no string. Just a pressed emblem in wax. 3 interlocking rings. Carlos opened it. Inside was a brass key, old, heavy, its edges worn down, and a folded piece of paper, handwritten in blue ink. The first line read, "This is the last key I still kept. Everything else is now in the right place." At the bottom, success is not what you build, it's what you preserve. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. Everyone knew who had written it, and Carlos knew exactly what to do. The very next day on B4, a small glass case was installed in a corner, not centered, not spotlighted. Inside, resting on a layer of deep blue velvet, was the brass key. Below it, a wooden plaque carved with one simple sentence. The last key. When the name was taken, he kept the door. Everyone who passed by paused, even if just for a second. A few new hires asked, "What is this?" Carlos would only smile. It's the one thing they didn't forget when they forgot who made it. Those who already knew didn't speak. They just nodded. Michael Hale never appeared again. No one knew where he had gone. No one saw him leave. No one walked him out of the building. But he was still there. Not in body, but in the way people treated each other after he left. People walked slower past the nameplate. Technicians were no longer the ones in the dark. Interns were no longer invisible in meetings. And when someone asked, "Who designed this floor?" no one answered. Must have been someone from back in the day. Sasha was invited as an honorary speaker for the new employee orientation. She stood on the small stage, once reserved for titles, facing a room of fresh faces, people not yet 3 days into their jobs. She didn't open slides. She didn't hold a microphone. She just told the story of a janitor, a man who didn't say much, a man who knew every corridor, every junction box, every vault code, because he had written them. And she closed with this: if you ever see someone walking quietly through these halls, don't assume they don't know anything. They may be the one who designed the ground you're standing on. Upstairs in the executive office, Eleanor Finch made a small change. The old painting behind the CEO's chair was taken down. In its place was a blown-up scan of the original hand-drawn blueprint of Sterling and Hale, the one signed by Michael Hale in the bottom right corner, its blue ink now faded. She never mentioned it in meetings, but anyone who stepped into the room noticed. It reminded them, some things don't need to be bold to carry weight. They only need to be put in the right place and not forgotten. At year's end, in the internal annual report, the company devoted a single page. No logo, no charts, no colors, just a close-up photo of Michael Hale's nameplate, captioned, "It's not about being remembered. It's about being worth remembering." Down on B4, the key remained in its case. No one dared touch it, not out of fear, but because they understood some doors no longer need to be opened, because the lesson has already been learned. Maybe you'll never look at a janitor the same way again. Maybe next time you see someone walking silently through a hallway, you won't assume they're just passing through, because sometimes the quietest people are the ones who laid the very first brick of the place we all now stand in. If this story touched you in any way, made your heart warm, or your throat tighten, or made you want to stand up for something that was once forgotten, share this video with someone who needs to remember. Justice doesn't need to scream to exist. It only needs to be remembered at the right moment. Like this video if you believe the truth can return, even after being erased. Subscribe so you won't miss more stories like this. Stories that don't just end, but stay with you. And if you've ever witnessed someone being forgotten, leave a comment below. We'll listen. Thank you for staying until the very end. You may not be a CEO, but you are the reason stories like this continue to be told.